Hello and welcome to this maths training video. In this video we're going to continue looking at our subject of fractions, and in particular we're going to look at mixed and improper fractions. Now we've looked in previous videos at a practical example of why we need to understand fractions, why this subject is so important to us as electricians, but it's on the syllabus and we also need to understand these because these questions may well come up in our exams, and also they're a pretty useful tool to have for the electrical industry and lots of other areas as well. So let's dive straight in and have a look at what we're dealing with in this video. So on the screen here we've got two fractions. Now when you look at these, they might start to look just a little bit different to what we've seen previously. So we've got on the left hand side of the screen here this 1, and then right next to it we've got 1 over 4. Now the way to think of this is it's almost like 1 and whatever's written here. So it's 1 and 1/4. And this is what we refer to as a mixed fraction. So this is a mixed fraction. And then over on this side of the screen, you can see here we've got a slightly more unusual looking fraction actually, because we get quite used to fractions having a 1 at the top, especially for electrical maths, but it is possible to have fractions with other numbers at the top. But what makes this one really unusual is the fact that you've got a bigger number at the top than you have at the bottom. And that is why this one is referred to as an improper fraction. So this is an improper fraction because it doesn't kind of follow the normal convention of small number at the top and bigger number at the bottom. But what's really interesting about these two numbers that we've got on the screen here is that they are actually equal. So they represent exactly the same amount, the same quantity of whatever it is that we're considering, but in this case they are exactly the same, just expressed in different ways. Now we can illustrate that by going back to our long-suffering example, our reliable example of pizza. So if we look at this now down the bottom, you can see here we've got 1 whole 1. So if we think about this as the mixed fraction to start with, we've got 1 whole 1 as represented by this number 1 here. And bear in mind you might have other numbers here, you might have 2, 3, 4, indeed any number. But here we've got 1, so we've got 1 whole 1 there, 1 whole unit. And then when we look at the fraction part of this mixed fraction, you can see we've got 1/4. So can you see there that this symbol down the bottom here, this diagram, represents what's going on with this mixed fraction? We've got 1 whole 1 and 1/4. So we've got 1 and 1/4, exactly as we've got on the left hand side there. But what's really interesting is if we count up the number of quarters that we've got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shaded quarters, you can see there we've got 5/4, or 5 over 4. So that's how this mixed fraction is related to this improper fraction. Let's have a look at another example. Okay, so we've now got 2 3/4. So this is our mixed fraction, you can see here, 2 3/4. So we've got another number here, we've got 2 instead of 1, and we've got a slightly different fraction here as well. So you can just think of this as being 2 3/4. So it's almost like there's a little and in between the two things there that's missing, 2 3/4. But the question is, what is that equal to? Well, we can figure out what it's equal to by again drawing a diagram. So down at the bottom here we've got 1 whole 1 and another whole 1. So that's the 2 part of this mixed fraction. So we've got 2 of the 2 3/4, and then if we draw a third symbol here to represent the 3/4, you see we've got 1, 2, 3 of the quarters that this pizza is sliced up into represented here. So we've got 3/4 there. Now if we count up the total number of quarters that we've got here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So what do you think our improper fraction is going to look like on this side? Well, let's find out. We've actually got, as you can see, 11 over 4, or 11/4. So again, always think in pizza when you're doing fractions, it's super helpful. And when we look at this here, we can see we've got 2 3/4 is exactly the same as 11/4. They're just expressed in different ways. Now in a future video I'm going to show you how to convert between these backwards and forwards really easily. This video we're just getting our heads around the fact that we've got mixed fractions, as you can see on the left here, and improper fractions, and they can be used to represent exactly the same things. Let's look at another example here. We're going to go back in the other direction for this one. So in this one we've got 5/3. So we're going to go from our improper fraction first of all, and we're going to convert that into a mixed fraction. So 5 over 3. Again, let's represent it with pizza. So if we have a look at what that's going to look like, the question is, what will this be equal to as a mixed fraction? And we've got, you can see there, if we count the total number of thirds that we've got here, we've got this split up into thirds, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 thirds altogether. So 5 thirds altogether. So that symbol represents this number. But again, now if we turn this into an mixed fraction, you can see here we've got one whole one on this side, one whole one, and then we've got 2 thirds. So this becomes 1 and 2 thirds, as you can see there. So that's how we go in the other direction. So again, this value here as an improper fraction is exactly the same as this value here as a mixed fraction. We've just represented them in different ways. Now again, it's important that we understand how to convert from one to the other, because it's very difficult to add up mixed fractions to other mixed fractions, whereas adding improper fractions to each other is really easy. But this is kind of not a very nice way of showing a fraction, because it's not easy to kind of instantly see how much it represents. It's not easy to see how many whole ones there are, especially these numbers get bigger and slightly more complicated. So it's a pretty simple thing really to understand the mixed fraction versus the improper fraction. We're going to have a look in the next video about how we convert from one to the other, and we'll be probably using this as we head into our adding and subtracting fractions from each other, as well as multiplying and dividing fractions by each other as well. So it's pretty handy to know this stuff. So just a nice short but sweet video for this one, something nice and simple, but definitely something that you need to know, and this may come up on your exam. You may be asked to identify an improper fraction or a mixed fraction. You may be given a list of fractions to deal with and asked to identify which one's which. And you may also be asked to convert between them. So it's very important that we understand that, so that we can answer those all important exam questions, get the Science and Principles question exam under our belt and be able to pass that. But also for those of us who perhaps go a little bit further in the industry, perhaps we're interested in doing design, perhaps we're interested in getting into the science behind how electricity works, understanding maths, understanding fractions is absolutely critical. We really need to know this stuff. So hopefully that's been of help to you. As always, if you have any questions, please comment below. If you've got any comments, or if you've got any thoughts, then please comment as well. And if you've made it this far into the video, extremely well done. And I'm assuming that you're already a subscriber if you've got this far, but if you're not, then please subscribe and hit the notifications button so that you'll always receive the latest updates from this channel. But all that remains in this video is to say thank you very much for watching.